Hello and welcome back to Decoded with AssetIntel. I'm Ash.
And I'm Ash. Great to be here.
In this series, we dive deep into complex topics in the world of infrastructure asset management. We take source materials like articles or research papers and really unpack them for you.
Yeah, the goal is to cut through the noise, connect the dots, and give you the key insights without you having to sift through everything yourself.
Today, we're tackling a really significant shift happening right now in bridge inspection data. We're talking about the move from the old National Bridge Inventory, NBI, to the new specifications for the National Bridge Inventory, or SNBI.
And it sounds technical, Ash, because, well, it is technical. But this isn't just tweaking a database. It fundamentally changes how we record, report, and analyze the health of our nation's bridges. It's a pretty big deal for critical infrastructure.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this, we're looking at a great piece in the AssetIntel blog. It really lays out the challenges agencies are facing and dives into a key concept and a specific tool designed to help navigate this transition, the Data Crosswalk.
Right. So our mission today, using this AssetIntel blog post as our map, is to really unpack what data crosswalks are. Why are they so essential for this NBI to SNBI shift? What are the real hurdles agencies are hitting? And crucially, how can a structured approach, maybe using specialized tools, help manage this whole thing effectively? We want to make sure data stays accurate and everyone stays compliant.
Exactly. Because hearing about migrating decades of data, hitting FHWA deadlines as the Federal Highway Administration, and ensuring everything aligns with NHWRM standards, it can sound overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're going to break it down, make it clear. Okay, Ash, let's unpack this NBI to SNBI transition.
Let's do it.
So the AssetIntel blog calls this a major shift, not just some routine software update. What does that actually mean for the data itself? How is it changing at its core?
Well, think about how bridges were described under NBI. It was established, decades ago. Data collection was naturally less granular then.
Right. Simpler times, simpler tech.
Exactly. NBI focused on rating the overall condition of the big pieces, the deck, the superstructure, the substructure, using a pretty basic 0 to 9 scale. It gave a good general overview.
A broad picture.
But SNBI, it demands much, much more detail. We're talking component-level inventory and condition assessment. So instead of just one rating for the deck, you might be rating specific things on the deck, like expansion joints, maybe railings, the wearing surface itself. Same for the substructure, you're rating individual piers, abutments, maybe even specific types of piling.
Wow, okay, so the sheer amount of data points just explodes.
It multiplies significantly. And the structure of the data changes too. It becomes hierarchical, nested under these specific components, rather than just those 3 top-level ratings. It's a fundamental shift from summary to specifics.
Like going from knowing a house has 3 bedrooms to having a detailed report on every single fixture in every room. So given that huge leap in detail and structure, what's the biggest headache this creates for the transportation agencies managing all this data?
The number one challenge, Ash, is getting that old NBI data accurately translated into the new SNBI format, and crucially, doing it without losing the valuable history embedded in that data.
Right, you can't just throw away decades of records.
Absolutely not. The AssetIntel blog really highlights the risks here. If the translation isn't done right, you could introduce massive inconsistencies. Data might not line up properly between the old context and the new. You risk misclassifying elements because the definitions or the rating scales themselves have changed. And this is a big one. If the converted data isn't precise and compliant, agencies face serious regulatory problems with the FHWA.
Meaning their submissions could get rejected.
Potentially, yeah. Which could impact funding, operations. It's serious. They're not just copying data. They're fundamentally restructuring and realigning decades of information to a completely new standard.
And the blog points out that bridge inspection software relies on decades of these records. Why is keeping that historical data usable so vital after the switch? It feels like losing it would be like erasing the bridge's memory.
That's a great way to put it. It is the institutional memory of our infrastructure. That NBI data tells the story of each bridge, its condition when built, how it's aged, problems that came up, repairs that were done, whether those repairs worked.
Like the whole life cycle.
Exactly. And that long view isn't just, for the archives. It's essential for making decisions now and for the future. Agencies use it to spot deterioration trends. Maybe certain bridge types age faster or specific repairs last longer.
For planning maintenance.
Absolutely, for proactive maintenance planning. It's also the evidence they need to justify funding requests, showing legislators at the feds, look, here's the long-term performance data, here's why we need this investment.
Got it.
Engineers rely on it to see how materials and designs actually hold up over time in the real world. So if that historical NBI data can't be accurately mapped and used alongside the new SNBI data, well, you lose a huge chunk of your ability to do that long-term analysis. You can't track performance properly. Your data-driven decisions become less, data-driven.
So it's way more than just taking a compliance box. It's about preserving the very foundation of their asset management strategy.
Precisely.
And this change isn't arbitrary. The blog hints at why the standards are evolving. Better tech allows more detail, new safety regulations come along, and there's just this huge push for agencies to base decisions on solid data.
That's exactly it. SNBI is the response to those needs. As we get better at collecting detailed info, and as everyone demands more accountability for infrastructure spending, the standards have to keep up. SNBI provides that richer data set needed for modern analysis and better long-term planning.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Huge shift, vital historical data, new complex requirements.
And that's where the Data Crosswalk comes in. It's the hero of this story, maybe. The blog defines it as a structured method for mapping data between different formats. Its whole purpose is ensuring accuracy and consistency during these tricky transitions.
It's literally building a bridge for the data.
You could say that, yeah.
The blog calls it a structured mapping tool and a translation guide. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. How does this translation actually work? The blog outlines some key steps.
Right. The first big step is field mapping. This is about figuring out exactly which piece of data in the old NBI system corresponds to which piece of data in the new, much larger SNBI structure.
Okay, connecting the dots.
Yeah, but it's rarely one-to-one. SNBI is so much more detailed. One NBI field might only feed into part of an SNBI field, or maybe it influences several different SNBI fields. So mapping defines all those complex relationships and equivalencies. It's like creating the dictionary between the two languages.
Got it. Defining the relationships. What's step 2?
Step 2 is data reformatting. Once you know where the data goes, you need to make sure it gets there in the right shape. This means adjusting values, maybe converting units like feet to meters if SNBI requires metric. It means reclassifying things based on new definitions in SNBI. An old NBI code for a repair type might need translating into a more specific SNBI maintenance code. It's all about making sure the data values themselves fit the rules of the new SNBI schema.
Okay, making sure it speaks the new language correctly. Then comes validation. Why is that so critical?
Validation is your quality control checkpoint. After mapping and reformatting, you need to rigorously check the data. Is it complete? Is it accurate? And crucially, is it compliant with all the new rules from FHWA before you finalize it?
Catching errors before they cause trouble.
Exactly. This is where you spot mandatory SNBI fields that are empty because the data just didn't exist in NBI. You catch inconsistencies that slipped through. Validation stops errors from getting beaked into your new SNBI database, which could lead to bad analysis or, like we said, data rejection. It's the final, is this okay? Check.
Makes total sense. Prevent problems downstream. And the fourth step mentioned is automation, using tools to streamline this. Why is automation key, especially with thousands of bridges?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Trying to do this manually for an agency's entire inventory, potentially thousands, even tens of thousands of bridges, each needing hundreds of data points checked under SNBI, it's practically impossible.
A nightmare.
A complete nightmare. Manual mapping, manual reformatting, manual validation for every single point. Hugely time-consuming, needs massive resources, and it's incredibly prone to human error. Think about the repetition.
Yeah.
Automation ensures consistency. It dramatically speeds up the process, potentially cutting months or even years down to weeks or days. And it significantly reduces the risk of those costly mistakes that creep in with manual work.
Well, let's use the blog's example to make this concrete. Bridge condition ratings. Explain the difference again between NBI and SNBI ratings.
Sure. Under NBI, you had those 3 main ratings on the 0 to 9 scale. Deck, superstructure, substructure, simple, broad assessment.
3 numbers. Got it. And SNBI.
SNBI shifts to component-level details. So for deck, you now need to identify and rate specific elements on it: joints, railings, wearing surface, the slab itself maybe. Superstructure breaks down into girders, beams, trusses. Substructure breaks down into abutments, piers, culverts, footings. Each gets its own rating.
So instead of 3 ratings, you could have dozens.
Easily dozens, yeah. Depending on the bridge complexity, it's a massive increase in the granularity and the sheer volume of condition data points per bridge. And it changes the data structure itself.
Okay, so with that specific shift in mind from 3 general ratings to potentially 40 specific ones,
Yeah.
how does a data crosswalk handle that during the migration?
The crosswalk acts as that essential translator. It takes the old NBI 09 ratings for deck, superstructure, substructure, and correctly places them within the new SNBI structure. But crucially, it doesn't just overwrite things. It preserves that historical NBI rating, so it's still there, still accessible in the new database. You don't lose the original context.
Okay, so history is kept.
Right. And at the same time, the crosswalk flags all the new detailed SNBI data points that are now required but didn't exist in NBI. It basically says, okay, here's the old rating, but now you also need to provide ratings for this joint, this bearing, this specific pier.
It highlights the gaps that need filling.
Exactly. It brings the historical summary forward while clearly showing where the new detailed data needs to be collected or entered to meet SNBI compliance. It lets agencies use their legacy data while they transition to the new, more demanding requirements, all without losing critical insights, as the blog says.
That makes the process seem much more manageable.
It's designed to. And this brings us to why having these structured transition processes using crosswalks is so vital right now. The AssetIntel blog really stresses how the whole infrastructure data world is constantly changing tech advances, new rules, more demand for data-driven decisions.
And the blog lists key reasons why crosswalks are essential in this environment. Let's run through them. First, maintaining data integrity. How does a crosswalk keep data accurate during that risky conversion step?
Well, bad data leads to bad decisions, right? Especially with infrastructure safety on the line. When you're moving data between complex structures like NBI and SNBI, there are just so many ways errors can creep in, misinterpreting values, mapping fields wrong. A crosswalk, especially an automated one built on clear rules, minimizes the human touch points in that repetitive transformation, which is where most errors happen. Consistent logic, built-in validation. It ensures data is converted accurately across the board. Preserving accuracy during the conversion is tough because the rules themselves are changing. You're not just moving data, you're often recalculating or deriving new info, which needs precision. Only a structured crosswalk really provides that reliably.
Right. It enforces consistency and accuracy when things are in flux.
Okay.
Okay, next. Meeting regulatory standards. How do crosswalks directly help agencies comply with things like the FHWA's NBI to SNBI mandate?
This is often the biggest driver, honestly. That transition isn't optional, it's federally mandated with deadlines. Agencies have to report in SNBI format. No choice. A data crosswalk, particularly one that already incorporates or lets you easily apply the official FHWA transition rules, is the mechanism that ensures the output data actually meets those new requirements. It makes sure the structure is right, the fields are there, the validation passes, aligned with FHWA and AHWA BRM.
And the consequences of not meeting those standards.
They can be severe. Data submissions rejected, compliance failures, potential impacts on federal funding, which is huge for bridge projects. It can disrupt everything. A crosswalk is basically the tool that ensures the data they submit is acceptable.
Keeps the wheels turning and the funding flowing. Got it. Another benefit, improving interoperability. How do crosswalks help different agency systems, inspection software, GIS, asset management, talk to each other? The blog says, work together seamlessly.
Agencies use a whole toolkit, right? Inspection data feeds asset management systems. Location data goes to GIS. Maintenance logs link back to inspections. If the core bridge data isn't standardized in the SNBI format after the transition, these systems can't easily share info. You get data silos.
Fragmented picture.
Exactly. A crosswalk produces that standardized SNBI output. It acts like a universal language that lets these different systems communicate. It avoids having to build clunky, custom connections between every single tool. Why is interoperability important? It gives agencies that holistic view of their assets, enabling better analysis, coordinated planning, more efficient work across departments.
Creates a unified ecosystem. Makes sense. And the last key reason, supporting long-term decision-making. We know historical data is vital. How does a crosswalk specifically enable using old and new data together for that long view?
By accurately mapping that valuable NBI history into the SNBI structure, the crosswalk ensures it isn't lost or unusable. It makes the old data accessible within the new SNBI context.
Because you can compare apples to apples eventually.
Sort of, yes. You can perform longitudinal analysis, compare today's detailed SNBI ratings with the historical NBI trends mapped over decades. See how different bridge types have performed, how effective past repairs were over the long haul. How does using old and new data together improve decisions? It shifts things from just reacting to problems towards predicting them. Understanding historical wear and tear helps forecast future needs, optimize investments, prioritize projects based on real trends, not just the latest inspection. It's about smarter, long-term asset management.
Preserving that history fuels better future planning.
Okay. But, while the benefits are clear, the AssetIntel blog is also realistic about the challenges agencies face during the transition itself. It's not always smooth sailing.
Right, let's get into those pain points. First one, data mapping complexity. The blog says many NBI fields don't map directly to SNBI, needing rule-based conversions. What does that actually involve? Sounds complicated.
It can be. Because SNBI is more detailed, you can't always just copy an NBI value over. Sometimes one NBI field informs multiple SNBI fields. Other times, you need to calculate an SNBI value based on several NBI fields using specific logic from the new standard.
Ah, so it's not just matching, it's applying formulas or logic.
Exactly. A rule-based conversion means applying algorithms or conditional logic. For example, maybe the NBI structure type code, combined with material codes and span lengths from NBI, determines the correct, more specific SNBI structure classification. It requires applying intelligence based on the standard, not just a simple lookup. Doing that consistently across thousands of bridges is complex.
I can see that. Another challenge, data gaps and inconsistencies. Old records aren't always perfect, are they?
Far from it, usually. Decades of data collection mean you'll find missing fields, maybe inconsistent formatting used over the years, outdated info. The move to the stricter SNBI standard with more mandatory fields just shines a big spotlight on these existing quality issues.
So the transition forces a data cleanup.
It often surfaces the need for one, yeah. If SNBI requires a field that's missing or unclear in the old NBI record, that gap becomes a problem the crosswalk process needs to flag, and the agency needs to figure out how to fill it.
And interoperability issues again, but as a challenge before the crosswalk helps, existing software might not be ready.
That's a big one. Many agencies have bridge software deeply tied to the old NBI structure. If their vendor hasn't updated the software to fully handle the SNBI schema and the crosswalk process itself, agencies are stuck.
What can they do?
Their main system might not cope with the new data structure or lack the tools for mapping and validation. This could force them into risky manual workarounds outside their system or relying on outdated software, increasing error potential, the potential bottleneck.
Serious problem. And compliance risks are a constant pressure throughout this. That tightrope walk between meeting new FHWA rules and keeping historical data usable.
It's a delicate balance, absolutely.
Right.
You have hard deadlines for SNBI reporting. The data must be compliant. But you also need to maintain the historical NBI data for long-term analysis and maybe legacy reporting needs. The challenge is converting in a way that satisfies both. Get the compliant SNBI data ready without corrupting the original NBI data or losing the traceability of how it was converted. It requires careful planning.
And finally, resource constraints. Time, expertise, technology, this all costs money and effort.
Definitely. Doing a proper crosswalk for a whole inventory is a big project. You need staff who understand both NBI and SNBI inside out, data management skills, maybe IT support. Building your own crosswalk tool, that's a major software project. Even using a commercial tool takes staff time for setup, review, management.
Especially tough for smaller agencies.
Yeah, smaller agencies often have fewer specialized staff and tighter budgets. Finding the time and resources for this complex data migration on top of their day-to-day work, it's a real strain.
So definitely a complex set of challenges. Technical, practical, resource-based, not trivial at all.
Not at all.
Okay, but let's shift back to the positive. The key benefits outlined in the AssetIntel blog when a crosswalk is done well. This is the payoff. The blog says it bridges the gap, prevents loss, cuts workload, ensures compliance.
Exactly. The effort pays off big time. First, accuracy and compliance. We talked about manual errors. An automated crosswalk minimizes those, ensuring consistent accuracy. By using the official FHWA rules, it guarantees the output meets federal and state standards right away.
Less risk of rejection.
Much less. And it preserves the historical data accurately, avoiding misinterpretation. Result: compliant data you can trust.
Getting it right first time. Huge. Next, efficiency. How does it save time and manual effort?
With potentially millions of data points, manual processing is just out of the question for most. A good crosswalk tool automates the really tedious stuff, applying mapping rules, reformatting, initial validation checks.
Takes the grunt work out.
Totally. Staff aren't manually digging through spreadsheets or writing complex scripts. It slashes the migration time. And by catching errors early with validation, it dramatically reduces rework later. Think about the alternative: fixing errors after migration. Way harder and more time-consuming than preventing them upfront.
Frees up skilled staff for better things.
Yeah.
Okay, third benefit. Seamless integration. How does it help manage old and new data together and connect with other tools?
The crosswalk converts the old NBI data into the standard SNBI format. Once it's in that format, it integrates smoothly with new SNBI data being collected and with other agency systems, GIS, asset management, maintenance tools. They all speak the same SNBI language. It keeps the history accessible within the new context for comparison over time. And crucially, during the transition period where you might have both NBI and SNBI data active, it allows you to manage both simultaneously without disruption. That integrated view is vital.
Makes managing that messy middle ground easier. And finally, future-proofing. How does this process prepare agencies for future data changes and protect that long-term knowledge?
Data standards will keep evolving, right? By implementing a structured crosswalk for NBI to SNBI, agencies build a repeatable method for handling these migrations. They learn the principles, adopt tools and processes.
Builds capability.
Exactly. It makes them much better prepared for the next standard change. And by carefully converting and preserving that NBI history within SNBI, they ensure decades of institutional knowledge. The real performance story of their bridges remains usable for future engineers and planners. It secures that long-term data integrity.
So accuracy, efficiency, integration, and readiness for the future. It really paints a picture of moving from a whiskey manual process to something much more controlled and confident.
That's the goal. It allows agencies to tackle this SNBI transition knowing they can preserve their past while meeting future standards.
Which brings us to the specific solution discussed in the AssetIntel blog, SNBIX. It's presented as AssetIntel's purpose-built tool for this exact challenge, described as powerful, automated, and agency-ready.
That's right. SNBIX is positioned as a specialized data crosswalk tool engineered by AssetIntel specifically for agencies making this NBI to SNBI jump.
So what is it exactly, and how does it streamline things?
Its core function is automation. It's designed to automatically take an agency's existing NBI datasets and convert them into SNBI-compliant records. The blog really contrasts this with those manual methods we discussed, the ones that are so time-consuming and error-prone. SNBIX aims to automate that core data transformation.
How does it do that? What are the key features mentioned in the blog?
Well, it offers automated data mapping. It has those predefined FHWA crosswalk rules baked into its logic, so it handles the complex field relationships automatically. It includes built-in validation and quality checks to scan the data, identify inconsistencies, flag missing required fields, catch formatting errors, all those crucial checks. The output is designed to be compliance-ready, and it's built for scalability and efficiency, meaning it can handle huge data sets. Think entire state inventories quickly, drastically cutting that manual effort.
That speed for large datasets is critical for agencies. What does the blog say sets SNBIX apart? What are the differentiators?
A big point they emphasize is automate the transition, no manual data processing required as the starting point. The process sounds simple. Import your NBI tape file that standard format agencies use, and the tool's built-in logic applies the FHWA rules automatically. It handles that initial complex mapping and reformatting without needing manual intervention right at the start.
That sounds like a huge relief. But the blog also mentions agencies can customize the logic. Why is that needed if the FHWA rules are built in?
Good question. While the FHWA rules are the baseline, agencies sometimes have unique historical data quirks, specific local needs, or ways they use certain NBI fields that require slight tweaks to the standard logic for their specific inventory to be perfectly accurate.
So it allows for local variations.
Exactly. Customization provides that flexibility. The blog also mentions support for FHWA transition JSON, files a format the FHWA uses for specific transition guidance, meaning the tool can incorporate official agency-specific directives to fine-tune the crosswalk even more.
Flexibility on top of automation. Powerful.
Yeah.
What about visualization and analysis features? How do they help?
The transition needs oversight, right? Features like side-by-side comparisons are key. They let staff look at the original NBI data right next to the converted SNBI data for the same bridge.
see exactly what changed.
Precisely. With color coding and tags showing changes, it's easy to verify the mapping and spot anything odd that needs a closer look. Having direct access to the FHWA Crosswalk and SNBI manual integration within the platform is also highlighted, puts the official guidance right there with the data. And things like custom sorting and filtering are just essential for managing and reviewing potentially massive SNBI data sets effectively.
Provides transparency and the tools for review. Now, the blog acknowledges it's not just conversion. Some SNBI data needs manual entry.
Correct. SNBI requires info NBI never had. The blog mentions around 48 SNBI fields that require manual entry because there's no NBI source data. SNBIX provides a structured workflow for this. It uses temporary SNBI codes -T to clearly flag which attributes need review and final input from an engineer.
Okay, so it guides the completion process.
Yes, and it helps manage complexities like many-to-one relationships where maybe one general NBI substructure becomes multiple specific SNBI peers and abutments. The tool helps manage creating and assigning those new component records.
And to tackle entering data for those 48 fields across potentially thousands of bridges, the blog mentions bulk editing tools.
Yeah, that's crucial for efficiency. SNBIX offers ways to update these fields in bulk, either exporting to Excel for mass updates and re-importing, or using built-in tools to edit many records at once within the platform, much faster than one by one.
Definitely. What about teams working together? Bridge management isn't usually a one-person job.
The platform supports multi-user collaboration, letting different team members, inspectors, engineers, data managers work in the system together. It also provides controlled data staging, a secure space to review, validate, and approve the converted data before it goes live in the main system.
With controls.
Yes, things like role-based access to manage permissions and audit tracking to log all changes, ensuring accountability and a clear history of what happened during the transition.
And the final step, getting the data out. Advanced data management and export options.
Right. Once the data is converted, completed, and approved in SNBIX, it needs to go into the agency's main system or inspection tools like Inspect Access. The platform offers flexible exports, JSON, Excel, custom formats. It allows targeted data exports of specific data subsets and even scheduled data updates for automated data flow into other systems, keeping everything populated efficiently.
So pulling it all together from the blog, why would an agency trust a tool like SNBIX for this?
It seems to boil down to turning a potentially chaotic, manual, error-prone process into something automated, verified, and efficient.
The core is the automation, taking out that repetitive manual work.
Exactly. And the built-in FHWA rules providing that compliance confidence from the start, reducing the risk of rejected submissions.
Plus, tackling the data entry and completion challenge with clear flagging and bulk editing.
Right. Add the full transparency from side-by-side views for verification and the collaboration features for team management. It's about removing the guesswork and the heavy lifting from a complex mandatory transition.
Okay, so Ash, as we wrap up this deep dive based on the AssetIntel blog,
Yeah.
the big picture seems clear.
Yeah, the NBI to SNBI shift is huge. It's not just an update. It's a fundamental change in how bridge data is handled. Agencies are facing real challenges, complexity, data quality, resources under tight FHWA deadlines.
And a structured data crosswalk emerges as absolutely essential for getting through this successfully. It's about accuracy, efficiency, compliance, and preserving that vital historical data.
The right approach, as the blog suggests, safeguards institutional knowledge, streamlines operations, and really sets agencies up for the future. Tools designed for this, like AssetIntel's SNBIX, are presented as key enablers,
helping agencies automate the complexities, ensure compliance, and manage the whole process confidently. It's about being ready for the SNBI era.
Absolutely. Being ready isn't just about meeting a deadline, it's a strategic advantage. It ensures critical infrastructure data stays reliable and ready for the sophisticated analysis needed to manage our bridges effectively.
And that brings us to a final thought. This whole NBI to SNBI saga, this focus on meticulously tracking the condition of something as fundamental as a bridge, it really makes you think, doesn't it? The evolution of data standards for critical, long-life assets isn't just an IT issue. It's about how we capture and use institutional memory, decades of it, to make decisions impacting safety and resources for years to come.
That's a great point, Ash. What does this specific challenge with bridge data tell us about the broader value, maybe even the vulnerability, of data integrity when we're managing any kind of long-term asset across any sector? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Decoded with AssetIntel. We hope this deep dive into data crosswalks and the NBI to SNBI transition was valuable.
If you're facing this transition at your agency and want to learn more about how AssetIntel and SNBI Exit can help you navigate it smoothly and ensure compliance, we definitely encourage you to get in touch.
You can easily schedule a call with our team by visiting our website at www.assetintel.co.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for joining us.